Hello everybody, welcome back for another video. Hope you're all doing well and that you're all having an absolutely amazing day. And without any further ado, let's jump right into it and what you all should be expecting at this point. Regardless of where prices might be, the optimism still remains quite high within the cryptocurrency space, as nearly all analysts are saying the exact same thing. It says it's a bold forecast, but it's actually one of the far more tame ones. In a bold forecast for the world's largest crypto asset, macro strategist, his name is Henrik Zeberg, that is Zeberg, has predicted an explosive bull run for Bitcoin, potentially surging to, here we go, 250,000 US dollars in the year 2024. We've heard this from a number, if not all of the analysts at this point. They've all predicted or have thrown out the number between 250/300 and or nearing $600,000 over the course of 2025. Those are the most conservative ones. The other ones that get a little bit out of control are the 750,000s, the 1 million by Samson Mao, and was it the other guy from Blockstream? And Kathy Wood, who recently came completely out of left field and rose her numbers. I believe she rose hers to $1.5 million. I sit here sometimes and they probably do. I was going to say, I wonder if they get different news than we do. They must if they're in that kind of circle. But geez Louise with the numbers, people. They're completely all over the place right now. During a recent interview with Bloor Street Capital, Bloor Street Capital, the investor noted that Bitcoin is currently on the brink of an explosive phase, set to go vertical. There were also, I don't know how many of you read articles that surround Bitcoin's price or things that other analysts are saying, and it kind of lightly mimics what I said about a week ago, how it was very weird that every single time that Bitcoin was pumping, it was like a very strong pump. There was never a going up by $100. It was pumping by several $1,000s at once. Apparently, according to a lot of people, the breakout zone is somewhere around $49,000 to $50,000, and therefore, that is the kind of like the ignition thing that a lot of people are waiting for. So it would then logically make sense that if we got anywhere near close to 50,000, that institutions would do everything that they could to make sure that we stayed below that, because I assume it's more advantageous for them to accumulate around $41,000, $42,000, $43,000, $45,000 as opposed to $58,000 or $64,000 if we are to see that type of a pump. The macro strategist established a conservative minimum of $115,000 this year, with the $150,000 mark deemed not only feasible, but potentially overshootable, suggesting the possibility of an unprecedented $250,000 valuation for the crypto asset. If everything lines up correctly, it should then make a lot of sense. We've been getting the accumulation news. We've seen the scarcity news. We've been hearing, it's been since 2011 that we first started hearing about supply crunch, asset crunch. Like, we know that there's not a lot of it left out in the wild, and that portions of it are being accumulated. I don't have it in this video, but I think after the first day or two, the fund just from BlackRock, I think, had accumulated over 11,500 Bitcoin. That was a day or two after the fund was started, and that was just from BlackRock. So like I said, the numbers are beginning to roll in. I spoke about that beginning of winter, I said if we do get a Bitcoin ETF, we will have numbers eventually as to exactly how many coins these companies are registrationally holding that they have to actually give information to the SEC to. But on top of all that, just all the news cumulatively that we've been getting about how there's not a lot, who's accumulating, the countries who are also buying and mining and stuff like that, coupled in with the halving, it's just been a very intense year. The year has, more than half this month is gone, but this has been a very intense beginning to a year financially. It's because of all the other things that we're also looking forward to, the interest rate cuts. There's a lot building up to this one moment, and I think or feel that all we really need to do is push past 51, 52,000 to really get that rush started. But I think I can feel the energy from a lot of people who are like, I don't want to use the term unsatisfied, but like a bit annoyed that Bitcoin didn't take off. And I make sure to mention this more often than I was mentioning it before, which was quite often anyway. Like, this is a really crazy asset class. People are fighting digitally in these streets, trying to make sure that they can accumulate as much as possible. And it's also from the institutions as well, regardless of what Vanguard and other companies might be saying. There's a huge amount of accumulation happening. Because doesn't it seem, this is my viewpoint on this, if we had heard this information from one or two different companies, cool. Okay, well, they're clearly somewhere else that we are not. But when you hear it, from, in my view, when you hear it from like 38 people, that all their charts, all these companies have their own charts. That's one thing that people sometimes don't know. They're not all looking at Bitcoin's price chart and going, oh, no, they have different metrics. They have different numbers. They have different things that they're like assigning value to. And they've all come to the exact same conclusion that this year we go over 100K, and that next year we are somewhere between $250,000 and $600,000 per coin. It's interesting to me that they've all, with their own metrics, own charts, own data, have all come to the exact same conclusion. He said, and I quote, "Bitcoin is going absolutely ballistic. It's going to go vertical. I don't know if that was a typo there, but it says vertical. I think we will reach at least $115,000. That's my minimum target. I think 150,000 is also manageable, and I can also see $250,000, end quote, said Zuberg. According to the pundit, a pivotal factor contributing to this anticipated surge is the expected entry of institutional and traditional investors into the crypto space, especially as the ETFs have received regulatory approval. Zuberg suggested that the first 4 months of 2024 could be exceptionally thrilling for the crypto space, okay, as these ETFs were given the green light. We'll see. We have no choice but to see because time will continue to go forward. But there definitely is accumulation going on. And what was that thing? Was it Wyckoff chart? I don't remember. There was some other chart that we had. This was 2 or 3 years ago that some other YouTuber had that showed this chart that was basically created by people on Wall Street to announce their entry into the space. And it was like a dance almost on the chart, very specific movements. And then at some point, this guy made a video and was like, that's the chart that came out in the 1920s or 30s. And this is this chart on Bitcoin. And it was the exact same movement of the chart. So we know that big money is here. It's just more of a between now and April, the calls for Bitcoin going ballistic are out of control. Between April to summertime, which is the time frame that I've given a lot of it to see the price movements, because historically, if this is your first rodeo at the Bitcoin show, what tends to happen is that prices move sideways until about 2 or 3 weeks before the halving. This is the way that it normally is. There's never usually a big surge, but you see movement. As we get closer to the halving, the price moves up. the day of and or after the halving, there's movement down. It's always this like sell the news, blah, blah kind of thing. And it always surprises me that anyone would be selling their Bitcoin in general. That's just like a mental thing for me. And then after that, that's the movement up. That's like the official start of the actual bull run season. But people have been saying that it started since obviously last year. Bitcoin 2.5 in price. So yeah, we'll see. It is nice, as I always say. It's nice to see the optimism in the market. I much prefer people saying that things are going to go swimmingly for the market as opposed to being like, yeah, by December, we're back at 15,000. So yeah, yet another analyst has walked their way into the cryptocurrency news by talking about that they believe we are going to go, where is it? Vertical. Is that a phrase? I feel like it is. I've never heard it before, but there's a lot of stuff I hear and I'm like, that's not English. And then someone's like, yeah, it definitely is. That's the conservative. What? If we manage to get to a $115,000 Bitcoin, altcoins have completely lost their minds. If we get to 150K this year, nonetheless 250,000, people have made a lot of money. That's the vertical news. And yeah, let's move on. Also, oh yeah, I should have just thrown this all together. I forgot this tab was even here. There's a lot of expectations as to where Ethereum's going to be going as well over the next couple of months. For those of you not looking at the screen, for some reason, this is now the new number that everyone's hanging on to. It says Ethereum is expected to pass $3,500. Michael van de Puppe is once again in the news, and he's been quite vocal as of late. As far as I can tell, he normally discusses a lot about Bitcoin, but for some reason, him and like a couple of other people, they're all under the impression of the $3,500 to a $4,000 Ether before the halving happens as well. I guess it would make sense logically. If Bitcoin goes from where it is now to over 100K and we don't see a $4,800 Ether, something's wrong. That, you know, that the numbers just simply don't add up. But as it stands right now, everyone's very bullish on Ether. The current projections that we've had tend to rely on the next couple of months. A lot of the predictions and charts that we had last year revolved around Ethereum from $10,000 to $12,000 to $15,000 at the height of the bull run. We'll see what ends up happening. The most important thing is usually always psychologically is just getting past the previous all-time high, 4,800. I don't assume there's much resistance there. It's more of a massive amount of price manipulation that we've been seeing across the wider cryptocurrency market because we know that everyone is hyper accumulating and Ethereum, as it has been for a while, is deflationary. So yeah, we'll see what happens. It says with a chance to rise to 3,500 within the next 2 to 3 months. That puts us just before the halving, which is going to become major news the closer that we get to it. That's the Bitcoin and Ethereum price news. And yeah, let's move on. You know what? Sure, why not? A lot of the doors seem to be closing, as in the doors of this saga, of this legacy. We have seen the news that apparently the entire thing, or nearly the entire thing, with FTX has just about finished. I think the people who are owed money are beginning to be paid back their money from FTX, which is absolutely incredible. We've had some news about Alameda. We had news about Celsius about a day or two ago that they're beginning to liquidate a large amount of their holdings, which are not a large amount of money to the market, that they've begun to sell off these coins and unstake their Ether to begin to give back to creditors as well. And I think the next big thing, if you will, next to FTX was Genesis. You might remember As far as we were told, the general public, the Winklevoss twins did not like Genesis, there we go, for whatever reason. We were told by the Gemini twins that they said that Genesis was a fraud and they were stealing money and they were going to take them to court and all these really absolutely out there kinds of things. And now this chapter also seems to be closing as well, which is a very weird spot to put us in, because in the cryptocurrency space, we've had over the course of the better half of 2 years, this news basically being the news over the last 2 years. It was these companies who collapsed, who had filed for bankruptcy, who had gotten in trouble, who had to pay people back. Genesis, I believe, is the last one who has to pay people back. We're also, as I said before, we're not really waiting for anything in the crypto space. So it's a very weird pseudo kind of thing that we're dealing with. We're not waiting for any Ethereum upgrade because this always happens every single cycle. We're waiting for something big, mega crazy with Ethereum. There's nothing like that. There is an update coming, but no one, not to be mean, no one's really waiting for it. We're not waiting for a Bitcoin upgrade. We have the Bitcoin ETFs we've been waiting for a decade. We have Bitcoin and Ethereum futures. There's no major update coming for Cardano. So a lot of the news, at least to me, just feels like we're kind of floating. Like we've exited a really big chapter in the cryptocurrency history books. And now we're just like witnessing accumulation and basically kind of internal and external fighting by a lot of countries right now. As we had Nigerian news, I believe the last video, and I forgot what else we've been dealing with as well, but there are a lot of countries and companies who are now like actively in the streets fighting Bitcoin, talking about it's bad, it's terrible, it's awful, we can't deal with it, it's blah, 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 and all the economic stability. And it's like, wow, we've really come a long way. As you know, that was the final puzzle piece. It was the ETFs and we got it. So now it's kind of like, what happens next within this space? Genesis Global Trading has apparently settled with the New York Department of Financial Services after the regulator filed a $1 billion lawsuit in October of 2023. Terms of the settlement disclosed by the New York Department of Financial Services NYDFS Superintendent Adrian A. Harris said that Genesis will forfeit their BIT license being the license that you need within New York State to be able to deal in cryptocurrencies. Apparently, it's one of the worst things in the entire world, and it takes about 2 to 4 years to be able to get it. Nonsense. And they will cease all operations in New York as well. Additionally, Genesis was fined $8 million due to anti-money laundering and fraud charges. If anyone out there knows something legal, like, legal procedures, I have a question for you. Why is it that every company in the cryptocurrency space tends to get some type of an anti-money laundering and fraud charge against them? And I ask because, not because these companies are fraudulent, but when you have to operate, or when you have to get regulated, when you get the BIT license, I was under and am under the impression that you have to give financial information to the people who gave you the license. As you are regulated, you will be regulated. They look through your numbers, they look through your files, they look to see what you're doing. That is to say, if Genesis has existed for 7 years, I don't know how long they've existed, random number, 7 years, bam, and they've been regulated thus far, why is it that at the end of the road, when the company ends up getting shut down, that's when regulators go, aha, you've been laundering money? And it's like, really? Were they actually? Because we've also had anti-money laundering charges against nearly every major crypto exchange, which is weird, because then I also ask, I don't feel like all of these crypto exchanges would have actively made sure that they did things that would have constituted money laundering. Why would you risk your business? Why would you risk your job? Why would you make sure that you, as a multi-billion-dollar company, you and all your other friends and every other stock exchange would also hold hands to do these things? That's what I also found weird about the Binance charges and the Coinbase charges and the Kraken charges and some of the Gemini charges that we had exactly a year ago, and the OKX charges and was it Bitwise? And I think BitMEX as well was also, I believe, thrown into the fray as well. And it's like, I don't really think that all these mega companies would have blatantly made sure that they were laundering money. But then again, who knows? I'm not part of these companies, but it's always a bit weird that there's always an anti-money laundering and fraud charge. And I'm like, were they not regulated? You gave them the license. You regulated them. Who was looking after their numbers? You only found this out after you told them to shut down. Harris's statement said that the Digital Currency Group, or the DCG, affiliate known as Genesis, failed to maintain a functional compliance program, displaying non-compliance with regulatory requirements established by the New York Department of Financial Services. According to the superintendent, this directly exposed investors and customers to exponential financial risks. So I think Genesis was helping Gemini run their Earn program, and you could earn cryptocurrencies through Gemini through Genesis. And I think the news is that Genesis filed for bankruptcy, or they froze their accounts. Something I don't remember exactly what it was anymore. It was a while ago. But then the people from Gemini completely flipped out. If you follow, I don't follow them, but they appear on my timeline, whatever it's called, quite often because other people are liking their stuff. The Winklevoss twins are intense. They tweet like every 3.5 minutes. I don't know how they're doing it. Like I can't imagine sleeping and tweeting as well. They're constantly tweeting, but when this whole Genesis thing happened, they lost their bananas. They completely went off. They were really, really angry. So who knows exactly what was going on. After 2 assessments, New York regulators found lax anti-money laundering and cybersecurity systems at the crypto trading startup. The firm reportedly also had no dedicated compliance chief. Okay, well, anyway, cool. That's the closure of a chapter. They have to pay an $8 million fine, and I assume there's a whole bunch of other smaller fines, but usually that's crazy. The initial lawsuit was $1 billion. They got from $1 billion to $8 million. Backing it up, that feels fraudulent to me as well. How did the New York Department of Financial Services come up with a $1 billion fine? Think of that. Think of that. That's like someone coming up to you and being like, hey, can you give me that $10,000 that you owe me? And you're like, $10,000? And you both go through paperwork and you look at everything and they're like, it was only $14. My bad. What numbers did they get to get to $1 billion that was then turned only into $8 million? I don't, no one regulates the regulators. There's so much. You try to. I can't be the only one. I try to have faith in some of these systems because it's literally all that we have. If you don't have faith in the system, you have faith in, I don't want to say nothing, but you understand what I mean. We know that there's like corruption and stuff, but I sit back sometimes and I'm like, okay, well, at least the bad guys, got their dues. But then I'm like, who's regulating the people who are supposed to be regulating the bad guys? Anyway, that's the Genesis chapter has closed. I believe that's just about it as far as I can tell. Alrighty, yeah. Let's move on. In absolutely never-ending story, I'm certain at this point, when the last fragments of Bitcoin are mined in the year 2140, we will still be going over this news. I cannot read that name. Shaktikanta Das, the head of India's central bank, the Reserve Bank of India, has reiterated the country's steadfast position on cryptocurrencies, emphasizing that it remains unaltered despite recent global advancements. Das reported to inquiries regarding the approval of the first listed Bitcoin exchange traded funds by stating, and I quote, "Our position, my position, and the RBI's position on this cryptocurrencies remains unchanged irrespective of who does what, end quote. The legacy of India and cryptocurrencies is you thought the whole Gary Gensler thing was crazy. This is the most tumultuous thing in the existence of finance. The regulators, bankers, governmenters of India have since 2017 said that they were going to provide proper cryptocurrency regulations for the region. It is currently the year 2024, and they have done jack diddly squat and probably do not plan on doing anything. It is quite intense because they have fought tooth and nail continuously to make sure that they are constantly heard on news and publications and on the internet, that they do not approve of crypto. They think crypto is X, Y, and Z, as opposed to just giving some type of cryptocurrency regulation. The idea has been, at least from what we heard and also just numbers, from Coinbase and Gemini, and I believe Ripple also tried to make a, whatchamajaggers, to get an office in India as well, is basically, with 1.5 billion people, I think India is the most populous place on the planet. They have surpassed China. If you can get 1.5 billion people into crypto, well, gosh darn it, here we go. Even if you only have 10% of that, nonetheless 5%, you have tens of millions of people, if not over 100 million people, who then enter the cryptocurrency market, which is also great for the market, but also, in my opinion, great for economic freedom for literally over 100 million people. And I believe that the government knows this. I would like to assume that people who run these governments are relatively competent. That is a thing that I also like to try and have in my mind, simply because I do not want to live in the world where everything is run by idiots. That would be scary and terrible. So I like to sit there and believe that these people know how to count. They know their numbers. They understand what the system is. And I think that India is one of the countries that is trying their darndest to make sure that other currencies or Bitcoin will not have any type of a chance within their borders, because India is a country, much like many others, that does not have the strongest economic policies. That is simply a fact based off of things that I've been reading in documentaries and just history. So upon the idea that when things were really, really bad everywhere in 2020 and 2021 and beginning of 2022, a number of countries began to see that as they could not take care of their own. People began to take care of themselves, and a lot of people began to buy into cryptocurrencies as a way to beat inflation or beat terrible economic policies. So India, once again, is heavily in the news right now as they have begun to announce that no, cryptocurrencies are still absolutely terrible. They do not accept them. They do not want them, because I think they know, as I've stated before, they understand that if 100 million people get into the market, it's going to raise prices. If it raises prices and the person next to you says, hey, I put $300 into the market, and then they have 3,500, well, that sounds like a great payday. I'm going to do the exact same. You tell your mother, you tell your aunt, you tell your uncle, everyone throws money into the market, and before you know it, we get news that 320 million people within India are choosing to transact in Bitcoin over anything else. It's probably also the fear of very simple circumventing. That's the word that I'll use there. We had news a number of years ago during the beginning of this discussion that India had begun to ban some of their larger paper notes, as they claimed that smaller merchants or people in general were using these to not pay taxes or to launder money. Like literally, like imagine the US government being like, yeah, no more $100 because this is how people are massively. But the issue was that when I was reading about it, they claimed that it was mainly smaller merchants. So like, depending on if you live in a big city, for those of you who don't, you've seen this either way. You've seen the people like pushing carts where they sell like bananas and oranges and apples and stuff like that. And they'll be like, hey, it's 2 apples for $1. That's who the government claimed was laundering money. The people who are making like $35 a day. And I assume in a world where Bitcoin has taken over more, or hyper Bitcoinization has set in for 100, 200, and or eventually 300 million people, these people would simply just start using their smartphones or using something else to tap each other's phones and also transact in Bitcoin that way. And the government would then kind of not be aware of what's going on. So I assume that all the fear is there. I really, not to segue too much, I'm really trying to stay on the path, but I really do. I can imagine what that world even looks like, but I wonder what the ramifications are. Imagine a world where the economies are booming, like economies are doing really well. Like imagine India's economy is doing absolutely incredible because the newfound wealth that people have made from cryptocurrencies is flowing back. You know, people are buying TVs, people are buying houses, people are buying land, people are buying, a whole bunch of different things. So when you go into like a hardware store or something, or into like does Best Buy still exist? I have no idea, but like something like a Best Buy, you can see the money flowing back into the economy. But on the outside is like the actual Bitcoin economy that only exists within itself. And people choose to use Bitcoin for things that they could not normally get anywhere else, that kind of thing. But I think governments, but I think they would also completely freak out. But I can see a world where like the governmental power comes from like making laws like don't jaywalk, don't steal from someone, like fixing roads, their normal job that many of them aren't doing right now. But that kind of being their purpose and not the creators of money telling other people what to do. But then it's also very abstract because I can't really see living in a world where governments don't control people through the means of money anymore. And this is why I think the news is very why I think the news is very fascinating of governments like already buying and mining Bitcoin, or like the US government having over $6 billion worth of Bitcoin. You can Google it as well. There's one of the videos from about 3 weeks ago. Like I can imagine a world where like, and I dare not completely use the term economic freedom, but something that we don't have right now truly exists. But then I can't see the definitive role of governments being the same. And this is what I think that they're panicking over, because if you've been doing the same for thousands of years, it's very difficult to imagine a world like where you're not the center of attention, where like your job is literally to help people as opposed to controlling them. It's something very like abstract. Like a lot of times, I'm sure I can't be the only one. Try to think of these things, like try to really sit down and think of like what they could mean to humanity for there to be like an actual shift. Like you only know your government as something that makes sure that they help people, as opposed to making economic policies that hurt them. It's difficult because we only know it this way. It also gets a far more complex. If you ever get a chance to read books about like ancient Rome and ancient Greece, it's fascinating because you realize that humans haven't changed. We've been, sadly, we've been doing the exact same things for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's very weird. So for there to be like a major shift, I assume logically probably terrifies governments. Das has consistently expressed skepticism about cryptocurrencies, asserting that they lack underlying value and pose substantial risks to macroeconomic and financial stability. And I also found that out as well. I used to think they meant like this would cause everything to crumble. They mean their system, what they have. Like, and it does create a gigantic rift, because I think, even in my mind, I'm a glass half full, rose glasses optimist. I assume the world kind of blossoms, but I think we see a general crumble of a lot of the systems and like, the lives of people who have burrowed themselves deep in the old system. So the financial stability and macroeconomic comes to like the idea of the old system being washed away. That's the risk that it actually poses. If Bitcoin, that's what I was saying before, like a lot of people understood that we got Bitcoin ETFs, but you don't get the solidification. Like this means that Bitcoin, in the eyes of institutions and banks, is now legitimate. It's a real thing. It's something like regulatedly tangible that they can now have access to. If you sit on the fringes of anything regulated, you sit on the outside of it, you're not deemed to be necessarily worthy by a lot of institutions. But now we got to the point where this thing is real. Like Bitcoin is officially 100% a part of the economic system. Think of that. It's very odd to like conceptualize. We will live continuously in a world for the future with Bitcoin, the same exact way that we do with gold. And Bitcoin will only get more rare and more expensive as time goes on. Isn't that weird to think about? Like Bitcoin, like literally has officially made it. India implemented a 30% tax on cryptocurrency trading, spending, and selling in 2022, effective from April of that year. That's what caused a lot of the hampering down as well. Can you imagine being charged 30% of a tax for spending your coin and selling it? Nonetheless, cryptocurrency trading, this was all, of course, done on purpose. Highlighting the potential risks, Das cautioned against embracing cryptocurrencies, especially for emerging market economies. He stated, for emerging market economies and for advanced economies. Economies also, traveling down that path will create huge risks, which will be very difficult to contain going forward because it shows, imagine roots from a tree crushing their way through concrete. This is where we currently are. It's a very fascinating thing. And once again, also, India doesn't have the strongest economy. It is expected that in the future, they may have one of the largest on the planet. But at the moment, they're still trying to pull themselves up. And also their inflation rate also isn't too hot as well. Yeah, very interesting time to be in the market. I know that, as I said before, things are quite chaotic. I think many of us were maybe expecting some kind of harmony within this space, but yeah, there's way too many other things happening. Yeah, I think that's actually going to do it for this video. I do sincerely hope that you have all enjoyed. I do hope that you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever the heck you might be. I do hope it is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and or supporting. And I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See